After studying for 6 days, I took the GRE this weekend and got a 325. So, just for a little bit of context on this, I signed up for the GRE um, last Saturday at night, and I had to take it on Saturday morning, the next Saturday. So it was very last minute, but it's just something I did. I was also working, my full-time job in between then, so I could only really study, for like a couple hours a day. Um, and so there are a few things that I learned about studying for the GRE. So most people that have taken the GRE, they've taken the SAT before, right? I mean, you need to take the SAT or the ACT to get um, into college. So what I found was I didn't find the math to be much harder, right? But the vocab was certainly harder. The vocab, I've been told that I have a more expansive vocabulary than most people, but even I found the vocabulary to be very challenging on that GRE. It had some words there that you never encounter in day-to-day life, and you would only really encounter if you read books from over 100 years ago. So I would say vocab is probably where they really get you with the GRE. If you knew all the vocab, that would honestly be fine. Now, it's pretty common knowledge if you just look with a quick Google search that most people tend to score better on the math than they do on the verbal. And after doing a few practice tests throughout last week, that was no surprise to me. Like the verbal it's a lot harder, the verbal reasoning, than the math, I would say. The math section, especially if, you've gone to college and you have a technical degree, right? Like I majored in engineering, so the math was no problem for me. The verbal was the issue, right? The main problem with math, honestly, is just the time limit, right? You just need to make sure that you stay on track and finish in the time allotted. So the lessons that I learned are basically, well, how I would study for this again, right? So number one, give yourself more time than 6 days. 6 days is not enough, right? I would ideally have wanted a 330 or above on the GRE, but I ended up with a 325. Still not bad, I'm fine with a 325. I think it's good enough for me to get into the schools that I'm applying to. But, if I studied more, I could have gotten a better score, and that would have, helped my odds. So, if you're serious about getting a good score, certainly study for more than 6 days. I'd recommend about a month based on, my experience. I think a month would have been enough time. If you're studying part-time. If you're studying full-time and you can study for, 8 hours a day, then maybe a week or two is enough, right? But if you're doing it part-time like I was, studying 2-3 hours a day, you really need to you really need like a month or so. At least, I would say. All right. And then number two, I would say that before you do any practice tests, just study vocab, right? So what I did is I studied vocabulary. I found a resource that had a bunch of common GRE words. It had like 1,000 words on it. Obviously, I couldn't learn all of them, but if I did, I'm sure that I would have done much better because, if you can just go into that test and know all the vocab questions, they're just going to be a breeze, right? A lot of those vocab questions, when you don't know the vocab word, you have to kind of try to infer from maybe some of the words you do know, some you don't. Maybe you have to look at the word and try to figure out the etymology. Latin did help, by the way. I studied Latin in high school, and knowing Latin did help a little bit because some of those words, those complex words, are Latin derived, right? So if you can pick out the Latin root in that word, that can help you make an educated guess as to what that word means. So yeah, I would study vocab first and foremost before you do anything else. Once you think you have the vocab nailed down, then I would strongly encourage those people, especially who have no problem with math, to just do a bunch of practice tests, like all the way through. Do the writing sections, do the, verbal comprehension, and the math sections just all the way through, because it mimics it really well. The other thing is, the test is not very long. It's only a 2-hour test, so you're not going to get super fatigued. You could even do like a test a day, which is kind of what I did. I did a practice test a day, and I guarantee you, if you do like 20 practice tests, you're going to do great, right? It's just a matter of volume. So those are the ways I would study for the GRE. And then my last warning to anybody is be aware that taking the test online is not as straightforward as you might think. So I had the option to take it in person or online, and so I saw that the testing center was far away, so I was like, okay, if I can take it online, I'd much rather do that. Well, let me tell you, the hoops you have to jump through to be able to take it online. I kind of just figured that it would be kind of a normal test, right? So I had a pen and paper, set up scratch paper for the math exam portion, and I really thought that it would, be straightforward. I could write on, the paper. Well, the night before when I was going through the checklist, I found out that you could only write in erasable marker on a whiteboard or a paper put in a sheet protector. I didn't have any of those things. So what did I do? I stuffed a piece of paper in a Ziploc bag and tried to write on it with a pen. All right? And it didn't actually write on the Ziploc bag because the Ziploc bag was too smooth for this to write on. So during the math exam, I was like carving, symbols and stuff into the paper, into the Ziploc bag, and hoping that it would like stay. I had to kind of like squint and, to see it even. It was not a good situation to be in. And it probably, wasted some time that it probably shouldn't have. So yeah, definitely make sure you read the requirements beforehand. Number 2, their secure browser that they use to take the test is not perfect. And when I ran the background, it said that my screen size was too small. I'm like, what do you mean screen size is too small? So I look up the requirements. It was more than big enough. The screen size requirements were basically, don't use a phone, right? And my laptop is, way bigger than that. So the width was, too small. And so I actually decreased the width and the pixels of my display, and then it picked it up accurately. So I had to make my laptop screen display like smaller, change it in the settings for it to pick it up. And that was kind of a pain because, it was, all tiny, and I had to, look at it really closely and squint. Well, then, I was like, okay, whatever, fine. Go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and then it's exam day, right? So you have like a proctor, right? A virtual proctor. And then, so, my proctor, he was like, what they do is they need to check your desk, right? They need to check the desk, they need to check the room around, check all the open doors, make sure nobody else is there. Fine, fair game, right? So the proctor goes, can you please, he was Indian or something. He goes, can you please move the camera around the room and show me all the walls? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I show him everything, and then he sees this area, right, which is the entrance to the room. I showed him the entrance because he was wondering where the entrance was, and he goes, that is not the door. And I'm like, yeah, that's true, and there's no door there. And he's like, I need to see the door. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I showed him my front door right over there. Okay, and he's like, can you please open? And I'm like, fine. I opened the front door, closed it, showed him the outside, went back. I'm like, all right, seems a little unnecessary, but okay. Went all the way around the room, showed him, my kitchen and all that. And then we got to, and then when I was showing him the room, I showed him, this is like my water boiler area, right? This door is not attached. And he goes, what is in that room? And I'm like, oh, that's just my water heater. He's like, is there anybody in there? And I'm like, no, no, sir. No, sir. Nobody is in my water boiler. And he goes, okay, can you please close the door? And I'm like, yeah, I could try, like, I was like, I could try to put something here. He's like, yeah, I was like, but the door is not really attached. And then he goes, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. And then what he says is that, so then I show him my desk, right? And so I show him my desk, and then it's like, he sees that I have a water glass and a coffee cup, right? Because I like to drink coffee when I'm working, and water, make sure I'm hydrated. I also had some cashews there for a snack. And he sees all that stuff. He's like, can you please remove the coffee and the water? And I'm like, but, I mean, yeah, but am I not allowed to drink? And he's like, no, you are not allowed to drink. And I'm like, oh, God. So, you're not allowed to drink water or coffee during the exam, or have snacks. Like, the only thing you're allowed to have on your desk is the sheet protector paper and a writing utensil, and that's it. And so, so I down the coffee and I down the water in front of him, and I just go, okay, so. Then he says that my back needs to be to the entrance. I assume he just doesn't want to. He wants to like make sure that nobody is coming out of the room and like, I don't know, coming into the room, right? And so I need to move my table over here to, like, it was originally facing this way. I had to move it this way. It's a big ass table, and I had to move that sideways. And then he makes you use your phone kind of as a camera and makes you look under your desk. So so there was that, right? A lot of hoops you have to jump through. Probably still more convenient than driving, but still a lot of hoops you got to jump through. So just be aware of all the requirements beforehand. Read the requirements beforehand, because that's probably going to be very helpful. And you won't run into the issues that I did. So while I was taking the exam, in between sections, I said, can I go up to get a drink of water, and go to the bathroom? And then he said, okay, but just make sure that it is less than 2 minutes. I'm like, will do. So I asked him for permission. He said yes. I was back in like less than a minute. And, I finished the test. Well, before I finished the test, at some point he said like that the camera was too angled, so he interrupted me in the middle of me completing like the math section, and goes, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt." Meanwhile, like, the time does not stop when they interrupt you. All right, so like, be aware of that. Like, I was looking at the clock, it did not stop, and he interrupts to say, "Can you please angle the camera closer to you?" And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, do I need to get closer to the laptop? And he's like, "Just angle it downward more." I'm like, yes, okay. And like, get back to writing, get back to, solving the problem. So it can be a little disruptive that way too, if they call on you for anything like that. And the time does not stop. So, if they do call on you for that, just make sure you resolve it really freaking quickly, because it's eating into your time. All right. So after that, I finished my test. You see your scores immediately, which is kind of cool, because I remember when I took the SAT, it takes like 2 weeks or something to see your score. But then I get an email like 2 days later that says, I violated a rule taking the exam. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, they said that because I got up and got a drink of, because I got up in the middle of the test, that I violated a rule, and I broke the rule. And then it said, luckily, the rule that you broke, it does not seem that you cheated when you broke the rule, so your test scores will still be valid. And I'm like, guys, how can you say I broke a rule when I asked the proctor for permission? I mean, it, something's wrong here, right? I mean, either your proctor should have, been telling me, okay, if you do this, you're breaking a rule, and then I wouldn't have done it. I would have held it in, I would have just been thirsty. That's fine. Um, or the proctor should have written a note down. Hey, I let him walk away. And it wouldn't have been said as a rule. Because when I read that email, I had a goddamn heart attack. Because I thought that they were going to cancel my scores. You know? Because they said that you broke the rules, and then in the next paragraph they said, but your scores are still going to be valid. So they really like to keep you on your toes at the GRE testing center. Anyways, that was my experience taking the GRE. I hope you found that helpful. If you take the exam, if you take it online, hopefully the study tips and kind of what to expect when you take an online exam are helpful. Online exams are convenient if you don't like driving, but they're not that convenient in general. But yeah. So, anyways, moving forward, tomorrow is my last day at Boeing. I got a notification on Tuesday that they're gonna have tomorrow be my last day. Yeah, tomorrow's Thursday, and yeah, that'll be my last day in the office, and it'll conclude 2.5 years at Boeing. I don't want to say too much, but it's been a cool experience. Definitely learned a lot about airplanes and how they're built, how they're run, how big companies are run. It's very interesting, and learned a lot about office politics too, and that's what they don't tell you in school, is that office politics are what get you. They're what make or break, your career if you want to climb that corporate ladder. And I didn't realize that, and you don't necessarily need to play dirty to win. I saw people that didn't, but you do need to play. And I didn't really play because I didn't know how to play, and I didn't know that there was a game. I didn't know it was a game. I didn't know I was playing, and so I kind of got blindsided. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's been pretty cool to kind of see the aerospace stuff from the ground up, see the commercial airplanes, and being able to work on the 787. Which is, in my opinion, the most technologically advanced commercial airplane out there, with the composite body, and that's just pretty cool. So yeah, that's the end of that chapter, and it's a little uncertain for me from here, but we'll see where I end up. I have not one, but a few plans in mind, which honestly is worse than having one. If you have one, then you know exactly what you're doing. But if you have a few, it's a little less certain. But yeah, that's the nature of things right now. It's a little less certain. I will say that Boeing gave a very good benefits package, or on leaving. They're very generous, right? In South Carolina, they can just let you go for no reason. It's a right to work state. So they can just say, you can just walk in one day and they can say, hey, you're fired, get out. You get no money, no nothing, whatever. Boeing has been pretty nice in what they give you. So, I'm grateful for that. And yeah, it's been a good time. I'm glad to have been able to contribute to the company on my factory rotation in BRNT, the R&D department, and yeah, just in general. It's been a good run. Anyways, I'm rambling about stuff that the video's not really about, but yeah, tomorrow's my last day at Boeing, so we'll see where things go from here.